Excellent, very good. I can see you can hear me, and good to see you all. And thank you for joining us this evening. And it is my absolute pleasure to invite you all to this special moment, a special lecture, a marquee lecture, in fact, in our lecture series. So the Maurice Child's lecture is an endowed lecture, and it is been endowed in the name of one of the co-founders of the firm CBT, and at one point or the other, the principals of the firm, all three principals, in fact, served on the BAC's Board of Trustees. And when Maurice Childs passed away in 2005, a little bit later, the firm came forward and said, their commitment to and their recognition of the important role BAC plays and the contributions the BAC has made, the BAC's alumni have made to the firm, and the contributions of the principals of CBT have made to the BAC. So the relationship is quite extraordinary, and it gives me tremendous pleasure to recount that and to acknowledge it. And if the family members of the child's family are in the audience, I thank them. And the employees of CBT, if you are in the audience, also thank you for supporting us and supporting this special lecture series. So the first lecture was held in 2017, and architect Tom Main of Morphosis was the one who gave that one. And the second one by Meryl Elam, and the third one by Craig Scott of Iwamoto Scott. And now, of course, it is my pleasure to introduce Juan Miro. Juan Miro of Miro Rivera Architects. And he has been a great friend of mine, but he is here not because he is a friend of mine, because he is an extraordinary architect, and that is the kind of work that we're going to see today. And it just happened quite serendipitously. And I would like to thank Dean of our School of Architecture, Karen Nelson, for actually, prompting this particular thought that let's think about this, the lecture, the Maurice Childs Memorial Lecture, and before we knew, Juan Miro's name came up, and here we are. So thank you, Karen, and thank you also for asking me to introduce Juan, which is quite an honor. So Juan Miro, he comes from a family of architects. His father, Antonio Miró, was an architect he's an architect in Spain. And Juan immigrated to the United States when he won the Fulbright Scholarship in the late 1980s. And in 1989, he completed a master's program at Yale University. And subsequently, he worked in Watney Siegel Architects in New York. And eventually he started his own firm in 2000 in Austin, where he also was he started as a professor, and he continues to be a professor at University of Texas at Austin. And for a significant amount of time, he was also the associate dean of the school. And he and I crossed paths when I was teaching at University of Texas in San Antonio, and happened to attend actually one of his studio reviews. So that is how we crossed paths first time, because both of us were working on lightweight structures at that time. And eventually we also were together in the same cohort of the ACSA Distinguished Professors, and we were both honored to be elevated to the Distinguished Professorship. Actually, that happened to be in Boston in 2010 and 11. So that's another time we crossed paths. But we've kept in touch, and He went on to, win the fellowship of the AIA in 2011. So he was elevated to the College of Fellows. And, his firm's work has been, widely recognized and widely published and honored. So over the 20 years, their firm has won more than 100 design awards, of which 40 are from the AIA at various levels. And the work has been published in more than 23 publications, books, and journals. And he has been invited to the juries of a number of competitions over these years. So quite an accomplished journey, professional journey, and an academic journey. And I think, I know that from our conversations that he values that relationships quite a bit. So as I was preparing to introduce him, it gave me a moment of reflection to go through his work. And here is how I would like to frame his work. And earlier we were chatting about it. If there is one quality that describes his work, and that is lightness. You might know that Italo Calvino, one of my favorite authors, Italian authors, he wrote a book on 6 memos to the next millennium, and one of the memos was about lightness. And I'd like to just quote from the book from Italo Calvino and frame, and then invite Juan to provide his lecture. So I quote from Italo Calvino about lightness. At certain moments, I felt that the entire world was turning into stone, a slow petrification, more or less advanced depending on people and places, but one that spared no aspect of life. It was as if no one could escape the inexorable stare of Medusa. The only hero able to cut off Medusa's head is Perseus, who flies with winged sandals. To cut off Medusa's head without being turned into stone, Perseus supports himself on the very lightest of things, the winds and the clouds, and fixes his gaze upon what can be revealed only by indirect vision, an image caught in a mirror. I'm immediately tempted to see this myth as an allegory on the poet's relationship to the world, a lesson in the method to follow when writing. And I would extend that frame here and say that that extends to perhaps the work of architecture and design. And so lightness, interestingly enough, is a common thread throughout the work of Juan Miro Rivera Architects. So it gives me great pleasure, Juan, to invite you to the Zoom stage and also talk about your upcoming book, The New Arcadia. So here I present Juan Miro. I am going to spotlight Juan now in just a second. There we are. I have found him and I'm going to spotlight him. There you are. Juan, you're on, and your mic can be now unmuted. I am going to make sure.
Now I can. Now I can. Thank you. Thank you, Mahesh. Can you hear me now? So,
yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Yes. No, that's great, because I was trying to unmute myself, and I realized that you had made sure that I couldn't until it was the right time. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the kind introduction. I love lightness. It's always a good attribute. I wanted to also thank the Maurice Child's Memorial Lecture. It's an honor to be invited and be with this great company of the previous people that lecture. Too bad that I cannot be in Boston in person. You know, it's always a city that I love to go back to. And I hope that maybe next time we will be able to do this in person. But it's certainly a pleasure to be back in Boston. So thank you, Mahesh, for the introduction, and Karen also for making it possible, making the invitation and making the all arrangements to make it happen. So thank you to the school in general. And thank you for all of you for participating and joining the presentation. I'm going to try to keep it within the time frame. Karen told me that some students have class at 7, so I'll try to go over. I have quite a bit of material, but I will go in some places I will stop more, and in others I will go a little faster. It's more about seeing the images, but just wanted to make reference to the title. The title is the title of the book that Building a New Arcadia that we are just publishing now. So we have the advanced copies. The COVID delayed a little bit, but I thought that the title could be a little bit like the book, a reflection on the work that we have done. This book reflects the work of the last 20 years. And in here working in Austin, like Mahesh said, and our publisher, when they knew that I was going to give a lecture in Boston, they basically said, you really need to have a slide at some point where you can highlight the fact that this book is available, and that you can offer a specific, this discount that they created for a promo code. So I'm putting it here because otherwise the UT Press will kill me if I don't put it. And so it's the code that will give a 30% discount, and also shipping, no shipping cost. So this book is a great effort of 20 years of work, and because the lecture is going to cover also a big range of time, Karen asked me if I could include also something that reflects on the trajectory of what got me to where I am now in Austin. How did I end up in Austin, and what was the path that I follow? And I told Karen that, of course, I'll be happy to do that. I mean, I think that if we go to the origin, I'll start with a picture of the city where I was born. I mean, this is as back as I can go to the place where I was born in Barcelona. And it's a city that my extended family is there, but my immediate family, my father, who was an architect, like Mahesh said, started to have a lot of work in Madrid, and we moved to Madrid when I was very young. So I grew up in Madrid, even if my extended family was still in Barcelona, and that's where I went to architecture school. And that's one of the things that I wanted to remind architecture students today, that the relationships that you make in architecture in school in general are very important. Sometimes you don't realize that those relationships can last a lifetime. For example, Luis Fernando Galeano, the guy that I'm sitting with there on the left at the table, he was my first studio instructor when I was 19. So we're talking about 30 something years. And he was my first studio instructor when I was in the School of Architecture of Madrid. So it is an example.
Just wanted to interrupt that your slides, if you'd like to share screen.
Oh, we don't see the screen?
Yeah, no, not yet. So you can now put the slides up.
Oh, you don't see the images?
No, no.
Oh, I have to share the screen. Okay, so 1 second, sorry.
No problem.
Let's see, where is the,
If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should see the share screen option.
Yeah, I don't see any of the Zoom stuff, let me, okay, let's see. Sorry about this. I thought that I was very good at this already, but.
There you go.
Do you see now? So let me. No, yes. But let me put it. So it's a slideshow. Okay, what about now?
Perfect.
Can you see it? Okay.
Looks good.
No wonder you were probably wondering, so I have the images. So this is Barcelona. This is the city where I was born, that I was saying. And then we moved to Madrid, and this is an image of Madrid, not that different type of city, very similar population, very similar type of city. And that's when I went to architecture school. So that's Luis Fernandez Galeano on the left that you couldn't see before. He was my professor when I was 19. Still, every time I go to Madrid, we have a place in Madrid. We have dinner, we see each other, we are in touch. So it's all those relationships that you make when you're in school, you cannot believe that sometimes can be lifetime relationships. So you just don't know. When I first met him, he's probably now one of the most recognized architectural critics in the Spanish language. But he was a very young professor when I first met him. So he was not necessarily anyone that anyone knew at the time, but it's great to maintain those relationships. On the right, you see my father, architect Antonio Miró, and Fernando Higueras, his partner. Very big influence, of course, growing up with an architect father. It's inevitable that he's going to take you to job sites. So this is me when I was 4, visiting a job site. I realized that that's what parents do when they try to get work done on the weekends and do family time at the same time. They take their kids to the job site. And I was lucky enough to work on some of the buildings that he was doing at the time. This one that I'm visiting as a little kid was put on hold for many years. And when it was finished, it was when I was in architecture school. So I helped to finish the closure of that space there. And the interesting thing about the influence of my father is that he was a European, very much influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, modern version of architecture. So he was an admirer of Frank Lloyd Wright and the organic architecture, and he applied that in many of his projects. And he was also terrific at sketching and drawing. So I love sketching, and I always said that I thank my father because I grew up seeing all his drawings all around. So it is something that I still value a lot, the sketching and the ability to express a project just sketching. But you can see here the kind of similarities with some of the interests that Frank Lloyd Wright had. So when I came to the US, I had 2 other mentors that were very important, and they were also along the professional and the academic line. So in the professional side is Charles Wathney on the right. And then on the academic side, I met at Yale also Michael Sorkin, and Michael Sorkin became also someone that I kept in touch, and we stay in touch until unfortunately he died of COVID-19 in March. I wrote an email the day before to him, just trying to check how he was doing. And the email never came back, a return, because he basically was already in the hospital. And is also a relationship that I value a lot, because both Galeano and Sorkin show me a dimension of architecture that is different than the one that you learn in the professional world. I think it's very important to be open-minded, and when you're a student, you're going to have professors that are going to open up your mind about ways to think about architecture that is not strictly the way you think about it when you're in the profession. And I will thank Michael Sorkin for that. And Wathney was the architect I met also at Yale, and then I went to work with him. And I went to work with him in New York. I worked almost 6 years, very important architect in the US. But the curious thing is that he was the American architect, very interested in the European vein of modernism. So we have the European interested in American modernist ideas, and then the American interested in Le Corbusier and the modernism that came with that. So it was for me a very interesting combination, comparing all the things that get accumulated when you are evolving in your design and your thinking. But all these people were very influential in shaping the career, and of course at some point you settle in one place. A job working with Charles Wathney brought me to Austin. I thought that we were going to go back to New York. We had just bought an apartment, but at the end my wife and I, here's my wife Rosa Rivera, and Miguel, my partner and brother-in-law. Oh my God, we look so young. It was a while ago, and that's when we decided to found Miró Rivera Architects here in Austin. So it was, in intuition. There was nothing per se, that we didn't have any connections with Texas. I had never been to the U.S. until I came to study at Yale. So It was very different than in Spain, where, you know, because of my father presence in the profession, so there were more people that I knew. Here I didn't know anybody, but it was a great opportunity to start a practice. And this practice, we have maintained it small, but we have a great team, fantastic people that have been working with us for a long time. Many of the people in the office have been my students in school, and it's really a privilege to work, you know, not only with your wife and your brother-in-law, but also with the people that you have known for years as students as well. It's something that I continue to enjoy very much. This is a picture some of my students that are, you know, watching this presentation will recognize. We took this picture last week in one of the outdoor classrooms that we discovered along the lake here in Austin. So we are doing mostly everything online, but occasionally we find moments to get together. But I enjoy the ability to combine the academic and the professional. So it's something that I hope to continue doing until the end. So I really think that is something that benefits my thinking, and my interaction with the students is always very enriching. So go back to Austin. So Austin, as you can see, if you remember the images that I showed you of Madrid, you can see this is the picture I can take on my way to my house every day from my office. It's you know, 8-minute drive. It's a little less than 3 miles. Very, very close, but it's already giving you a sense that it's a very different city than Madrid, where I grew up, right? Madrid is a very compact city, what we call normally compact cities. And Austin is what I call a landscape city. It has nothing to do. You can see that this is a very different place than this is. And there are many reasons for that. And this is one of the things that I wanted to introduce to give you a sense of where this, a lot of the work comes from. When you think about a city like Madrid, this is how Madrid was when Austin was being founded and was starting to grow. Madrid was very compact because it was a walled city. It was a city like medieval cities in Europe. It was walled. It was very dense because it had to keep everything safe inside the walls. So the city grew very dense, and it's obviously very attractive when you visit it now, because it has that kind of picturesque sense of discovery. And order was created by carving it literally out of this very chaotic fabric, and it's a part of the DNA of the city that remains to this day of building a city with a higher density. So Austin and Madrid have very much the same surface, but in Madrid there are five times more people living in the same amount of space. So a landscape city like Austin has a central part, the downtown and the university, and then pretty much all around east, south, north, and west is like an urban forest that surrounds this central part. And that has played a critical role in the work that we have done. So the work we have done, in a way, it relates to the place that we are, and this city is different than all the cities. So a lot of the work that I'm going to show is more related to work done in Austin rather than other work. We do work also in other places outside Austin, outside Texas, in other parts, but I concentrated in this for this lecture. And one of the things that you realize when you look at Austin is that this type of city that blends with the landscape around is not a new city in the Americas. In the Americas, there were cities like this before the arrival of the Europeans. So, for example, the city down below Austin there is Tikal in Guatemala, had the same density that Austin has nowadays. The population density was similar at that time in the 7th century in Tikal that it is in Austin nowadays. And the thing that also was typical in American cities is that there was a very, very reverential connection with nature. Nature was revered. What they built was very much trying to integrate themselves with nature, and nature was very much at the heart of every decision making they did about what they built and where they built it. So the pyramids were recreations of the mountains with temples on top, the same way that there were altars on top of the mountains. So there was a sense of reverence and connection and integration. And this applied to cultures in the North American part of the Americas. When I talk the Americas, I'm talking about North, South, and Central America. In Taos, New Mexico, the same way. There's a relationship with the sacred mountains. It's very strong all over the Americas. When you look at Machu Picchu, for example, this is the sacred stone of Machu Picchu. If you look at this stone, it's reproducing literally the mountain, the sacred mountain to the east. It's really a sacred stone. That's how it's known. And it's a thought that is so alien to our Western tradition, the notion that a stone can be sacred and that you can recreate a monument as an imitation of nature, when the Western canon of art is very much about imitating the human body. And in this case, they were no interest in imitating that. The imitation is in nature. So why would they do this? They were seeing themselves integrated in nature. So when you think about nature in the way that ancient cultures saw themselves, they were part of these mix of things around: mountains, water, fauna, flora, and the humans interacted with a sense that the sacred manifested itself in that environment. When the monotheist cultures and religions created a God, the creator, everything changed in terms of the relationship between humans and nature, in the sense that if God is the creator of nature and God, the creator of humans, then the relationship is going to be very different. Humans are going to see with a different eye nature and more reverence to the God, the creator. So this is a very kind of simplified way to say something that fundamentally changed the way people relate to nature. And now that we're thinking about global warming and all the climate change and all the things that are becoming now mainstream, in a way is trying to redirect. If we can put our effort in trying to reconnect with nature, we will be on the right path. And how to do it is very much a challenge. But I think that we just need to immerse ourselves the way we used to in ancient cultures and think about this new religion, and using the word religion here as the etymology of the word. Religion is religare in Latin. So it's about reconnecting. So the notion of religion as a way to reconnect can be interpreted as a way to think about the way that we can rethink about a consensus worldwide that will get us across this challenge that we have in front of us, of the impact that we're having on nature. And I think that really this is the way we need to look at it, in the sense that if you think about the potential, and I've written several op-eds about these topics with a colleague of mine here in Austin, Fernando Lara, and one of them, started, let's build a global consensus for reconnecting with nature. If you think about the Paris Accord, it's like reconnecting with nature must become the international consensus of the 21st century. This is an attempt to take this sense of the leadership of this effort cannot be just simply one or two countries. You need a consensus at the global scale. And the Paris Accord, the agreement in Paris, was really as close as a unanimous agreement of all the countries in the world. It's an agreement that the US decided to abandon when what it was needed is the leadership of the US, when all the countries in the world, North Korea, Syria, Yemen, any country you can imagine, they have all come on board for that agreement. And I think that we have to build on that to really face these challenges. Otherwise, it makes no sense to try to do it in isolation. So let's talk about architecture more in detail, right? When you think about this image, you realize that the way the Greek thought about architecture really had an incredible influence in the rest of Western architecture, and up to these days. They created the Parthenon to house the new Olympian gods that were humanized, and all of a sudden, the US embraced that language just because it was coming from Greece, that was, the inventors of democracy. And all of a sudden that language became the language that represented the institutions in this country, where it was not necessarily making, any kind of connection with what was happening inside that temple, what happens in the buildings that adopted this language. This obviously drove Frank Lloyd Wright crazy. Frank Lloyd Wright was absolutely furious that the country was imitating styles that were coming from Europe. He was a believer that the architecture of this country had to be connected to the land of the US, and the land of the US was the inspiration for his architecture, the organic architecture that he invented pretty much from scratch. And so this is a tradition in the Americas that is very important, and we need to remember that some of the best contributions of modern architecture of the Americas are the architects that embrace that relationship with nature, like Faye Jones, or like in Mexico, Luis Barragan, embracing the landscape of the desert and the rocks and the trees. Or in Brazil, you have the example of Niemeyer trying to connect with that exuberance of the landscape of Rio de Janeiro. And so that connection with nature is at the heart of a lot of the things that we have been able to do in terms of connecting with this very utopian but very real and very generous nature that people came for when they came to the Americas. So there's a utopian spirit in coming to the Americas that was a place, a pristine place for new beginnings. And that's where the Arcadia comes from. Arcadia was a real place on the Greek mythology, but it's a real place in Greece. But it's really a place, an evocative place associated with nature and harmony. So this is what the title of the book is. You know, it's very much about how everybody's looking for that Arcadia, that place where they can find themselves connected to nature and prosper. And so in the Americas, the Mayan cities did this by adapting to the landscape, by adapting and building in ways that they interacted with nature within the city. So we saw it also in Tenochtitlan, and when the Spaniards came and built their cities, they used an order of the grid to try to overlap this with the nature that they found. And what they found is that the indigenous populations had already used the grid. This is Cholula, a town, a pre-Hispanic town that already used the grid to in a way expand into nature. So the cities were not closed cities. This is a very important thing that is very different from European cities. The European cities were walled cities. American cities, with exceptions along the coast in the Caribbean and in Florida, there were open cities. So the open city meant that it can expand into the landscape. And this is what happened to the cities in all the Americas, not only the US, you know, all over the Americas. It happened also before the Spanish and the English arrived. So Austin was laid out with a grid too, and a grid that can be expanded into the landscape. And so that grid, when it grows, it becomes the city that is now basically Austin. And when you look at these early maps on Austin, what you realize that since the beginning, Austin has been an accumulation of single family houses. So single family houses have dominated the essence of the city from day one. So there's a grid and the grid grows. And when that grid grows, it keeps blending itself with the landscape. And as it grows, it becomes planted with more and more trees. So the forest that is created with the city is not the forest that was there. This forest is created by the growth of the city. And it becomes a very attractive place to live. And this was attractive before the pandemic, is becoming even more attractive now when you think about the connection with this environment. So when you look at this, you say, well, I would like to see what it's like to be under those trees. And this is one of the things that we have done in the book, documented a lot of the windows into the fabric of the city. When you look at this on the left, you know, you can see a pretty dense part of the city in terms of the older part of the city. And you can see that the lots are very narrow, but you can still create that moment of your own kind of Arcadia in the back of this, in the lot. So for example, this house on the right is where my partner Miguel lives. It's a bungalow from, you know, the late 19th century. And then he added to it and work around the trees. So those images that you see from above is basically where people live under these trees. It could be very modest lots, it could be very large lots, it can be on a hilly part, it can be in different places, but it's a very strong connection with nature. And this is an opportunity that those trees allow. So it doesn't matter if it's, you know, next to the river, small. This, for example, is an area of town that it was surprisingly next to the water, but very kind of very modest houses, very small, very disconnected because there were not that many bridges across. And the ability to be immersed into that environment is one of the things that is very attractive about living here. So as I said, the houses can be very small, very modest. It could be in hilly terrain. In this case, we had to build this following the contours, trying to save the trees, very strong regulations to try to save the trees. So this is a very important part of the building in these environments, that there are a lot of regulations to control what you do and what you can and cannot do. So the ability to connect affects the way that you design these houses and the way that you have to respond to the specific conditions that you find. For example, this is my own house, you know, is a house that is not, you know, around this neighborhood, it's not conventional to have courtyards. We put walls on the front And we created spaces that are allowing us to create that sense of, you know, privacy, the sense of connection with the trees, with the views. We frame windows. You know, we use windows to frame that connection with the landscape. It's a very narrow, very shallow lot, so you have the ability to connect with that outside space. And this is something that we do in our architecture a lot. How do you frame that particular view that is giving you that sense of connection? So you can have a painting, you can have a window like this, and it's basically creating that connection. You can do it also in larger piece of glass, but when you have those trees, you want to have that connection as much as possible. You can use water. You have courtyards also wrapping around, but there is a sense that you are trying to take advantage of that beautiful connection that we have with the natural environment. The natural environment in Austin is very important in terms of the way it can be developed. There's a lot of floodplain issues. There's a lot of waterways. So the water is a very important factor. And when you think about the way the city grows and expands, and the rivers and the flows of those moments creates also great opportunities. So when we had opportunities to build in this kind of environment, the first thing that comes to mind is what Mahesh, the president, talked about in the introduction, the notion of lightness. How do you build something that feels like it belongs more to the water? So this is a boat dock that we built where it's trying to emphasize that sense of lightness. You don't know how heavy it is. It feels like it can go downstream at any moment. And this sense of lightness is something that we think about the structure in the same way. How can we take the material to the place what it can be? You know, when you look at this, is light as it can be. And we are on purpose trying to respond to this environment with a sense of lightness that allows for that to blend and to feel less heavy-handed. And so the notion of lightness is something that indeed is behind a lot of the thinking that we do. This next project is a good example. We did a very particular site where we had to connect two parts of a parcel with a bridge. These are some of the sketches that are done when you are thinking. And I tell my students always think about how quick is a sketch in giving you a sense of the understanding of the place. So when you look at this, this is the sketch that many times publishers like to publish and everything, but I like the messiness of where it happened. So this is what it happened when we're having conversations. Miguel and I share a desk across, you know, we have an office together, and we can be sketching at the same time in the office. Sometimes we're all sketching around the same sketch. And so it's a very informal process, but you get the thinking happening, and that becomes a reality. And you try to maintain that sense of lightness, because the environment is a very beautiful environment that you're trying to respect, and you're trying to connect in that light touch. So the notion of the light touch, this is all made with rebars. This is a learning lesson that I had from my father. That the space that I showed you at the beginning, he used just simple rods to build those trusses. And I said, well, we can use those same rods to build this bridge. So you don't know where the influence may come from, but sometimes that influence can be dormant in your head until the moment, appropriate moment happens. And I like the evolution of how this over time, this is coming back 10 years later, and then the way it ages, the way the nature starts engulfing this, and how the presence of this can be much more noticeable when you see it on one angle. When you see it sideways, it can disappear more. The vegetation changes dramatically. You can see that all of a sudden 10 years later, but the presence of the bridge becomes even more mimetic. It feels like it's blending with its environment. It just feels like it's been there all along. So that sense of lightness, we like a lot in terms of blending and integrating. This is a little bit the theme of the first part of the presentation, when I was talking about the effort of integrating yourself, you know, and trying to, in a way, blend yourself here, the pool and the water of the river, and then the bridge goes away, and it's a great moment when that happens. And then you go back another time of the year, and then the bridge presence is there. There's a sense of lightness, but it is a sense of presence also. There's nothing better than that sense of the human intervention in a beautiful landscape. It's a very beautiful moment, even when it's very subtle. So this guest house that connects this building, I love also with the time when all of a sudden you can see this moment where the sense of nature engulfing you can be pretty intense, you know. And I always like to think that if we were to abandon these buildings, you know, in no time nature will take over. almost the way the Mayan cities were taken over by when they were abandoned, the vegetation covered. This building will be pretty much gone if we let it, you know, just by itself for enough time. So I like the sense of how over time nature reclaims its presence, and you need to have that dialogue to maintain it and to relate to it. But the way the architecture tries to emphasize that sense of panorama, of connecting. So when you have that around you, you just want to maximize the sense of connection with that beautiful environment, both at this level and the upper level. So this is something that it is, I think I'm realizing that I'm going to need to go a little faster because I have more material here to cover. But some of these other projects are interesting also because we want to show that many times when these get published in magazines, they feel like very isolated projects. And I want to show how many houses there are around this one. There are a lot of houses all around, but you try to create that privacy that is a wedge lot. So there's a big house on the left, a big house on the right, and you try to hide and create that space. Courtyards allow you to do that. Walls allow you to get privacy. And then you start framing the views without trying to, you know, the inside courtyard like this one, the notion of the stair as a sculptural element. This is something that we have included in the book. A lot of drawings that explain the technical aspect of how this is built. But you can see that the idea of creating your own private space, even if the houses are very close to each other, can be achieved with the use of vegetation and smart orientation, obviously. And in this case, almost like the Mayan temples, you try to get above the tree canopy. So we did here a room at the top. This is the way you access to the top. Is there almost a reward at the end of this very sculptural stair that gets you to the top, and you have a fantastic view when you top the treetops, and you get that sense of almost like a forest that is an ocean. It's basically a green canopy, constant canopy all the way around the central part of the city. So it is something that when you look at this, you don't realize that there are all houses all around. So this feels like it's the middle of the park. No, it's all full of houses all around. This is one of the advantages of this urban forest, that it can make it go away. This is another example of a house that is trying to top over the trees. This is the sketch that generated it. And you can see here when you look over is very much what this house, why this house is called Vertical House. This is the only project that is not in Austin, it's in Dallas, but a lot of the things that I said apply to Dallas, apply to most of the cities that were conceived in the 19th century in the US, and a lot of these relationships are very similar in Dallas. The house is vertical to try to maximize that moment of getting above the tree canopy, and it's very much, and this is, I don't have time to get a lot into the details, but I wanted to emphasize the sketching as a way to capture the essence. These sketches Miguel and I did after flying back from Dallas, after meeting the client, and the essence of the house was conceived in that sketch. So this is the effect. These are some of the drawings that we included in the book. We did a lot of these drawings to explain very carefully. So the book is full of a lot of these construction drawings that explain how this is built. It's like, how do you do this? When you look at this image on the right, it's like, that's the sketch that conceived it, but this is the final product. So how we were able to do it is something that we wanted the book to be able to explain. So there's a didactic component on that. That's the shot that made the cover. Some of the images of the environment around. So just to complement this, I wanted to say that the cities need other things. So you need your domestic spaces where you can, your personal shelter, your refuge, your place to go back to. And then there's places that you need to meet with other people. We need, in cities, we need public spaces, we need pedestrian streets, we need meeting places, we need landmarks. So this is the other component that now is being basically very much shaken by the COVID crisis. You know, we cannot meet the same way that we like to meet. And there's a need for cities to complement this connection with nature with opportunities for people to do the other things that are needed in this kind of environment. So it is very much a learning experience. So for example, the city of Austin is learning how to build along the streets without really pushing the buildings back with the parking. So this project is very much about emphasizing that connection. So the street is very much, the idea of building the building to the street is the essence of this project. And you can see how the building embraces the street and creates a very welcoming porch. This is an idea that makes the building, you know, friendly to the neighborhood, but at the same time, it creates opportunities for people from the inside. This is for a nonprofit doing work in, you know, for very disadvantaged people, kids coming out of the foster care. So it gives them a place to meet outside also. And even if you're in the city, you're connecting with those trees, you're connecting with that outdoor space. That's very important in our projects. So another moment where you can gather is, for example, for events and a concert hall and an auditorium like this for the public school system at Austin. This is in the East Austin. These two projects are in the traditionally segregated part of town that is being now built on with new spirit. So this is an institution that serves the whole campus, the whole city, but it's located in a place that was traditionally segregated. So it's for the public school system. And it's very much about creating a friendly street where there is still nothing, because this building is happening in the former airport site. So the street is the main driver of the decisions here, making an access point from one corner, an access point from the other, and glass facing the lobby that gives a lot of activities, very strong visual connection with the street. And you can see here the chamber itself is that volume that protrudes up. It becomes an iconic element in the new neighborhood. But from the street, you can see the activities happening. So this is where people congregate. It becomes an exhibition space. It's a place where you can connect with students. This is, again, for this public school system. So all the high school students perform here, and there's a need for these kind of spaces. Unfortunately, we cannot use them the way we would like it nowadays, but this is a very vital part of cities. Cities need other opportunities to congregate. So, for example, we had the opportunity to work on the big buildings around the Formula One track. And when you think about it, this is another reason people congregate. They congregate to participate in communal experiences. It can be concerts, it can be a race. So you think about the ability of this to attract people, not only from Austin, but from all over the world. It's amazing that thousands of people come from all over the world for these events to Austin, and millions of people watch it on TV. So providing this kind of background for the architecture for these people to congregate is another fantastic opportunity. So you can go back to your own private place, but you want to be with a lot of people for certain moments. And people do that. It feels like now with COVID, it feels like when you look at these images, you say, oh my God, this is a nightmare, because it looks like we cannot do this for a while, but we will be back doing those things. And the architecture reflects the spirit of the event, right? So the architecture is light. This is very much like what Mahesh was saying. Performance is the key. So Formula One cars are as light as they can be to do the thing that they need to do, which is to go as fast as possible. So this building is as light as it can be to do what it needs to do. It cannot be any lighter. And its lightness in steel means cost effective. So if you design it well, you can be more cost effective because you have managed to make it lighter. And that's one of the things that we're looking for example, here, very specifically. Lightness is good because in the case of steel, its tonnage is reduced, and automatically that gives you that extra benefit that is more cost effective. So you can create a lot of things with steel and creating some light structures that you let them deflect, and all of a sudden it can be much lighter than normal because you don't need columns at the end because you're accepting the deflection of the steel. So gathering is very important for these events, and icons. You need that, iconic elements. You need that landmark, that reference. When you go to cities, you need that memorable moment where you can recognize the moments where you can orient yourself, the moments that you can connect with people around architecture that is recognizable. That's what we wanted with this, create an iconic moment that people will remember. It's in TVs. It has become the most Instagram place in the state of Texas. Is doing its job, and the main purpose was to create a sense of place. And the sense of place, again, is generated by sketching and thinking, a lot of effort and a lot of work. But it is interesting when the essence of the idea can be reduced to this very kind of strong sketch that can capture the idea of what is eventually being built. So you can see here, likeness was very important as well. This structure is basically based on the notion that you have repetition of elements, you can make them lighter, and you can make it strong that way. And it becomes another place to gather. So we love the ability to create very private spaces, but also very public spaces. So the notion that thousands of people, Austin is the live music capital of the world. There was no venue like this in Austin. So it was a great opportunity to do something beyond the racetrack, So we created a beautiful place for people to enjoy concerts. And the backdrop is the tower. So the tower is used as a backdrop for something that is a communal experience. That's a very effective way to create a sense of place. And also there's a destination. People go to the top to get a fantastic view of the track. And so we have to build this, and this is another type of drawing that we have done for the book specifically. So it's very detailed. It shows exactly how all this was put together, how it was built, and it was built very quickly. But again, with the notion of lightness as being your friend, you know, making it lighter makes it more efficient and more cost effective. The glass floor, the notion of like dynamic movement, the way that the Formula One has embraced this as a very kind of connected with the race car, and the notion of high technology and the sense of Austin becoming a destination now worldwide because of the Formula One race and Moto Grand Prix and everything. So lighting becoming a very important element to create that iconic reference, and the sense of movement and the sense of excitement that this event brings. So the last project I'm going to show, very much is the last one, is a project that is almost the opposite. And this is what is fascinating about being an architect. You have to be working sometimes with completely different type of issues. So when you're working for a nonprofit, the lowest budget you can imagine, I mean, that all the building I show you is the lowest budget that you can do, because the foundations will not give any money to if they go above a certain cost. This is as diametrically opposed to the Formula One racetrack. It's a Hindu temple, and it's showing also how the city is growing. It's a destination from people from all over the world. It's a very inclusive city. It's a very a very cosmopolitan city, and the Hindu community here in Austin needed a place for school and a potential for growth, but a temple itself. Also a temple and then a school. So you see the temple on the right, the school on the left. And we use the inspiration, and this is another thing that I tell my students, going back to history is a beautiful place to go, because you can learn a lot of things. You don't need to replicate, you don't need to imitate, but you can be inspired by some of the things that you can learn from history. And when you're looking at history here, what you're seeing is, a way of doing things in the Hindu tradition that we wanted to reinterpret with very low budget too. And we needed to understand the process. For example, in this case, this is the ceremony the Swami of the temple had to do to ask for forgiveness to the Mother Earth for the digging of the foundation. So this is a very specific ceremony that takes place. So you need to understand enough of the rituals, enough of what's going to happen there, and you respond to it. So architects, we have to constantly get on someone else's shoes to understand what they're looking for and what is important to them. So in this case, we created a courtyard made out of blocks of limestone, very simple blocks of limestone, very cost effective from the quarry, just drop them there. Very beautiful way to create an enclosure that is part of the ceremonies that they do before entering the temple. We did 108 blocks, which are the 108 poses of Shiva, the god, the Shiva, the god, and then is a very important opportunity for this community to find moments to raise money. So basically, all these were available for families to donate money and to be recognized in this block. So you need to accept that these things are going to happen, but in this case, it's very beautiful that we were able to have the 108 poses of Shiva that are shown here in these plaques. So it's really rewarding when you have to make these adjustments. So I always say our firm, Miró Rivera, is not specialized in any kind of work. We work from residential to high rise. It's very unusual in the US. My father told me that you can do those things. In Spain, it's more common. It's not as common here in the US, but it's something that we have fought hard to try to do, to maintain the ability to do any kind of project. As long as the project asks for design, the budget is not important either. This is also very, very low budget, but we were able to do all the things that we're looking for. For example, the most sacred part of the temple is the highest point. So the altar itself has to be the highest place on the building. So we wanted the light to wash down from that point above the altar piece. This is something we learned. The Swami was very effective in conveying to us. Another of the drawings explaining the construction. We think that it's a great opportunity for students to always see how things get built. It's something we take very seriously, and we enjoy very much that process. For example, when we put the cap of this space, the stipple that goes on top, this is designed with galvanized piping that is used for fencing. This is a company that does fences, the most mundane aluminum fences that you can imagine. We went to them, we said, hey, we have something that we want to do with you. Would you? And we did it in one single fabrication, and then we put it on top with a crane. It was beautiful when we saw that the pipes were made in India. So you can see that we live in a globalized world. And then we saw the print on the tubes that said India. This is the way this inspiration from these temples in India came. And so the notion of how these places become the places for our cities, for Austin, for this Arcadia, all these people that come from everywhere. I'm an immigrant. I came and I made my home here. All the people that come and make their home in Austin feel like this is the place where I can prosper, where I can do what I do, whatever it is that you do. And the gatherings, the spaces that people used to gather are very important as much as the private spaces where people live. So this is the last thing that I'm going to show, just to say that Austin can become a model for the sustainable and inclusive city, something that I wrote recently a couple of weeks ago, to just show that there is a model for a low density city that can be very much a sustainable and inclusive city. And this is not necessarily the most common position in academic circles, because there's a little too much of an obsession with density as the panacea for all the maladies of cities. And I think it's losing sight of the DNA of different cities are different, and we cannot apply the same methods in every place. And Austin, I think, is doing a good job in maintaining a very good balance of making a very, very forward-thinking, sustainable development, but at the same time making it a very inclusive place. A lot to learn, a lot to do, still a lot of work to do. Nothing's perfect, but it's the place where I think that we are aspiring to do. Mahesh, done. So thank you very much. And I'm trying to finish right on time.
Perfect. That's a great job. And we may have time for a question or two. So I wanted to open that up, and please feel free to type the questions in chat, or you may unmute and or raise your hand so I can actually unmute you and get you to ask the question, whichever way. So Juan, that was quite an inspiring presentation. And in the last work, you said 108 poses of Shiva. By the way, my name is one of the names of Shiva. So that is actually an interesting moment you ended on. And,
I'm going to go there, Mahesh. I'm going to go there and take a picture of the blog that has your name, because it has the name, the pose, and then so I'll send it to you. I'll look for it.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is terrific. And so any questions from the audience, please feel free to ask. And I am going to, if I may, I'm going to turn off the spotlight so that you can see each other if you would like to, and go to the gallery view.
Oh, I'm going to put the
yeah. Yeah. So
there you go. Book. I want to make sure UT Press was very happy to see that I mean, they were not enough to create a special promo code. So
yeah. So any questions, please post in the chat. And I know that you have to run everyone to another class, but those who can hang it on for a minute or two, you're welcome to post a question and have a chat. There is a question. Do you always try to bring the outdoors indoors?
So I can, sorry, I cannot read the chat. I don't know where it is. I lost
will read. No problem. I'll read it for you.
Can you read it? Can you read the question, Mahesh?
Yeah. So do you, let me read the last question. I think, do you always try to bring the outdoors indoors?
Yes, that's one of the basic things that we always try to do. It's not always possible. It's not always desirable, because there are some like the auditorium, like the performance space on the auditorium that I showed. You don't want to have any connection with the outside for acoustic and performance reasons. But as a general rule, it's such a basic and simple way to create a better space when you have a clear connection with the outside. And this is something that I tell my students. There's a perception that once you go outside is the landscape architect's kind of domain, and it feels like you are all of a sudden not supposed to think about that. To me, the most beautiful spaces are the ones that are that transition. You go from inside to an outside, but cover and define. So defining spaces that are transitional is one of the things that is very important for us. So yes, in general, we try to do it also with the materials, sometimes going from the inside to the outside. You know, we live in a very, different world now that when before air conditioning and it was possible. So we tend to forget that there's a beautiful opportunity to connect with the outside. So we try to do it all the time. Yes.
Great. One more question I'll take, and it is about if you were to be able to get any commission you would like, what would you like it to be?
Oh. We are now waiting the decision for a very important building that we hope that would be the top of the list, because we are finalists for a very important building at Rice University. So that would be the one that I will hope. But in general, I like buildings that require a specific connection with natural light and public gathering. I mean, I like the publicness of architecture. So all these opportunities to work in public buildings, it could be a museum that is a challenge to bring light in ways that is poetic, but it's at the same time functional, and it brings the outside to the inside in other ways that needs to be more controlled. So I would say that, you know, a student center in a important university or a museum.
That sounds great. And so I think we are 2 minutes over 7. So I would like to thank you, Juan, for such an extraordinarily inspiring presentation. It's great to see you. Good to see the new works. And I certainly would like to swing by one of these new works sometime as soon as the opportunity presents. And certainly looking forward to seeing the book in my hands. And thank you for visiting virtually the BAC, and hopefully you'll be able to visit us in person as well in the near future.
I would love to. I would love to. Thank you all of you for attending. Any questions? Send me an email if you have questions. If you have, I don't mind to keep the conversation. I know that sometimes, when we're rushing, it's not easy to have that question ready. But if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll be happy to continue the conversation. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Mahesh, for the invitation.
Absolutely, Juan. So we posted the email in chat. So you are welcome to drop a note to Juan Miro. And so Juan, so thank you, and my best to Rosa and Miguel. I know they are probably in the audience. And I know your San Diego is also in the audience. I saw him on the list. So
yes.
Excellent. So all the best, and we'll stay connected.
Okay.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
And enjoy. Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Now he